Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for having us here today to talk about how to shop for home care services. My name is Alex Wong. I'm here with Laura from Home Instead, and what we're going to do is to walk you through essentially what you need to know before you shop for home care services. So just a little quick introduction about who we are. I'll do our introduction first, and I'll let Laura introduce herself as well. So I'm part of my care community, and what we do is we provide a free advisory service for families who are looking to navigate elder care topics. Whether you have questions about home care, about financial planning, end-of-life services, whatever the topics are, we likely have research that can help you understand how to think about the topic and how best to work with companies to buy those services. With that, I'll let Laura introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Laura Levine. I'm a community liaison nurse for Home Instead. So what I help is navigate through that journey, well, when you're first thinking about the home care process. So, you can feel free to reach out, to call. We can answer all those questions. We start with an evaluation and determine all of your needs and how we can help move forward and ask all the questions that you need to be answered.
Great. So we're so happy to have Laura here today because she's from Home Instead, and she's seen a lot of requests for services, and so we certainly welcome her expertise for this presentation. So some of the things we're going to go through today is just walk you through functional assessment, what to understand when it comes to a person's ability to be independent on their own. Once they stop being able to be independent and living on their own, that's when they should consider the use of home care services. As part of that, we'll define what home care is and what it is not. Give you an overview of what the general costs are for home care services, what it means to use an agency versus an independent contractor. Some people do like the use of folks that they know they can hire informally. There are pros and cons to doing that, and we'll walk you through what those pros and cons are. And then we'll wrap things up with a recommendations on how to approach the buying process. Laura, is there anything else that you think would be helpful for us to cover today?
I think you pretty much answered it, but I think absolutely the first place to start is the free home care consultation.
No, that's a really helpful recommendation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the use of agencies. So one of the first things that I want to go through is just talk about sort of the, what are the activities that seniors and families need to be aware of. So when they're doing this today, they're not thinking about it, but eventually as we get older, it's not a question of whether you lose some of these capabilities. You will if you live long enough. It's just part of the aging process, is natural. And as part of that natural aging process, once you lose the ability to do some of these things, that's where having some outside help will be very helpful. Some of the basics, activities, daily living, things like bathing, dressing, the ability to go to the bathroom on your own, the ability to move around independently, eating, continence, those are common things that every one of us are able to do when we're younger. And then there are more advanced, complex activities such as making and answering phone calls, shopping for groceries, and making sure that your home is stocked, preparing meals, taking medications, cleaning and maintaining your home, driving around or using public transportation, and paying for bills. Those activities require a bit more processing, a little bit more coordination. Those are areas where people could use help as well. Once seniors start losing the ability to do some of these things, especially mobility, meal preparations, cleaning the homes, that's when they should really begin to think about the use of home care services, or at least find help through families or friends as well. Laura, anything else you would add to that?
I think that's pretty much everything. And like I said, when you start noticing these and you're noticing a change, absolutely you want to start the process of reaching out to a home care.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like to mention, when it comes to home care, is that home care. Think of home care as sort of this emergency service that you want to activate when you're ready, but even when you're not ready, it might be helpful to understand what your options are. The thing is, when you do need something, sometimes it comes at the worst moments when you don't have a lot of time to evaluate your options. So planning ahead is also helpful as well.
So sometimes you may, not just in emergency situations or when you note a decline, but home care can also be an asset for companionship, for someone to take you out, be with you, even when you are well. Sometimes when you're not driving anymore, having a caregiver in place that can take you shopping and just take you out, maybe lunch, that's a good place to start as well.
Yeah. So what is home care? Home care, essentially, the way this is defined is, think of it as non-medical care. If you have an acute illness or something that's more complex, chances are you'll need clinical assistance. But if you are, in fairly good health, but you are losing the ability to do certain things on your own, like cleaning, meal preparations, right, taking care of yourself, those are considered non-medical services, and home care companies are a great place to get those services. The one thing to note about home care services in Massachusetts is that in some states, home care services are a licensed service. They do require an accreditation. In Massachusetts, they are not. So what that means is any company can set up shop and suddenly declare themselves as a home care support company. So do be mindful of that as you do your evaluation. And we'll walk you through what to look for during this hour. So one of the questions that we normally get asked a lot about is, how much is this going to cost, right? And I would say the cost can vary widely. There are a bunch of factors around that, but generally think of the cost for home care services at really about $25 to $50 an hour. If you are using an independent person to help with home care, meaning they're not affiliated with any company or agency, they tend to be closer to the $25 mark. Sometimes you'll see that folks who are willing to take a little bit less than that. And with agency, think of the costs at really $30 to $50. Many times, most agencies are charging really between $38 and $42 an hour. So, agency use. So if you are going to go with an agency, what you get from that service is you get a company that stands behind the work. They will go through the process of hiring individuals, make sure that they have the right background, they're running background checks. They do all the things that you would expect a company to do. The company, if there's an issue with the care person coming out, they will find alternatives to make sure that there is adequate support for what you need. So that's the value behind using an agency. Laura, anything else that you want to mention?
Yeah, I think, important, with all the agencies out there, I think, obviously if you sign in with a home care, you want to make sure that you have staffing, right? No one ever wants to sign in for a home care company, rely on a caregiver, and then no one's there. So that's an important question to ask. But you do want the oversight, right? You really want a home care company that is following through, checking in, making sure everything's, status quo, everything's going according to plan. Okay, so a lot of quality assurance checks are helpful.
Yeah. And so when you work with an agency, there are certain terminologies or business terms that we want you to be aware of and even ask questions about. When it comes to payment terms, there are different things to understand. A lot of times what you get quoted are what's considered the weekday rate. So when they say, it's going to cost you $38 an hour, they're really saying, if we are providing the service to you on a normal weekday, that's the amount that you should expect to pay per hour. If you are looking for someone who can provide services on a weekend or nighttime, some agency will charge extra for those coverages. So do ask about, hey, do your rates change if I need someone on a weekend or at night? There's also the concept of minimum hours. So when they're quoting you a rate of $38 an hour, is that assuming that there's a minimum that they're thinking about? Some companies have a 4-hour minimum, others have 6 hours, and some will say we have no minimums. Generally, if you're getting a company that has no minimums, they're going to charge more per hour. And the reason for that is, think about it from an employee standpoint, from a provider standpoint. If they're only coming out for an hour, 2 hours of care, we all know how bad traffic is in Boston around the Melrose locations. Just the amount of time it takes to get to and from a location, they're spending a lot of time on the road, so they want to be able to get more hours rather than less. Otherwise, the employee is not going to make a whole lot of money, nor the company is going to make a whole lot of money for that service. Overtime rate and policy. Sometimes if you need care beyond 40 hours, for whatever reason, are they going to charge an overtime rate for that? So understand that ahead of time. Holiday rate and policy, same issue. We have Memorial Day coming up. What happens if you need someone to cover for Memorial Day? Is that considered a holiday, and is that charge going to be 1.5 times the normal rate? Live-in rate and 24-hour care. Most people don't realize sometimes they do need help around the clock, and there are 2 options for getting that help. One is called live-in rate. With a live-in rate, generally the person's going to stay in the home 24/7, up to a certain amount of time that they're going to cover for services. However, with a live-in rate, 2 things. One, you can expect to pay a little bit less because one of the assumption around why you're paying a little bit less is that you're going to give them time to sleep. Generally, companies will ask for an 8 hours uninterrupted sleep time so that the person providing care can get a break during the day. So that's what a live-in rate is, and it's usually cheaper if that can be arranged. 24-hour care means we need around-the-clock care. In order to provide that staffing, usually the companies will have to bring on multiple people to provide that care. So from that standpoint, the cost is going to be higher, even though they both kind of feel like the same thing. The last couple items I want to highlight, and I'll want to run a question by Laura. Cancellation policy. Understand what the cancellation policy will be. If you need to cancel someone coming to your home, are you going to get charged for that scheduled services? How long of a lead time do you need to provide notice to the company? And then the last thing is termination policy. With termination, like let's say that you're needing care for someone for a brief period of time. It's not a long-term thing. So you're looking to buy services for, a few weeks here, give and take a few days, right? But you don't quite know when it's going to end. Termination policy is something that's important to know. Companies may require you to give a certain amount of lead time to cancel services. So if mom or dad or someone you know is recovering faster than you're expecting, you may not have the option to end the services as quickly as you want. So be aware of what the termination policy is for the company. Different home care services company have different rules around all these aspects. Laura, we talk about sort of, these sort of terms for home care contracts. Anything we're missing here?
Well, when you do the home assessment, when you have a rep come out from a home care, all of these questions should be answered. You should have no questions by the time you're done with your meeting. There are, when Alex touched upon termination policy, I could also say short-term temporary rate. So if somebody only needed, short-term services, maybe they're coming home from the hospital or rehab and they only need like 1 or 2 weeks of care. Those can be established as well. Or maybe you need care because your children are, going on vacation and would like it in there. So that is a short-term temporary rate that some home cares will offer. But yeah, all of these questions should be answered, and they'll go into depth about all of that.
I think, before this presentation, you mentioned a couple of things about agency policy that might be helpful for people to understand as well. Can you talk to the live-in policy and what it means to have uninterrupted sleep? What happens when it's interrupted?
So for a live-in rate, obviously you would have a caregiver who lives in the home for so many days, but those overnights, typically they get paid, they're sleeping. So that's why it's cheaper. There could be additional hidden costs if that caregiver does have to get up, throughout that night. So be aware of those charges. If you have 24/7, obviously that caregiver overnight, it's an awake overnight. She's going to be there for any amount of time that you do get up during the night.
Yeah, and then what about deposits? Do home care companies require that?
So with some home care companies, there are different, requires of payment, right? So some may not require a deposit. Some may require a deposit, to begin services, and there may be hidden fees. So please ask all the questions before you start that process.
So the next section, a lot of you may not realize that even though you're interested in buying home care services, there has to be the right fit for the provider as well. And so the provider will typically want to do an assessment of the patient and the family environment before they determine that this is a good fit. Laura, can you speak to the evaluation process and what families should expect?
So when I do an evaluation for the families, we go over everything, right? Every client is unique, and we want to tailor those needs and requirements specifically to them. So it could be, based on medical needs, what kind of caregiver would we put in the home? It could be personality, right? We want to make sure that the caregiver is matched up to the client. We want them to be happy with who is coming in the home. A couple of things, nobody wants to admit they might need care, and, people don't want a stranger in their home. So finding the right home care is absolutely necessary to establish that relationship moving forward. So during that assessment time, we not only look at the medical, but maybe other needs that the family or the client may need during this process, okay? And who else that they work with in collaboration for the benefit of the client.
Yeah, and one thing to note is that, the primary goal for the assessment is making sure that there's a match, but the home care provider are also looking for a few other things. One is, as I mentioned before, home care service is really about providing non-medical care. So they may, in their assessment, realize that what you need are really more acute clinical support. And if they determine that those support is beyond what their agency is capable of providing, they may refer you to a company that can help with that. The second thing to note is that, it's really important that, for these home care providers, they're coming into your home and they are providing care so that you can age and recover in your house. However, it's important for the companies to assess the home environment and make sure that your home is actually a place where you can actually safely recover in your home, and it's also safe for their staff to be there as well. Anything else that families should know about the process?
I think, just starting with, contacting the home care, right? And you should be getting all the information to help you through that process, right? You really need a lot of support and guidance, so the process is easier, not more difficult. That's not what we want to add to that stress, right? Home care should be that support service for you.
Yeah, and then the last thing I'll sort of wrap up, or add before wrapping up this topic is, as part of that evaluation process, is super important for the family and the agency to have a upfront discussion about the cost and budget. Home care, and we'll get to it a little bit later, are generally paid through private pay. So affordability is something that's important to get out in the open and get agreement on as well. So we talked about home care. There are options to certainly acquire the same services by hiring someone directly, or hiring what I call an independent contractor. When a family is thinking about those options, as I mentioned before, the cost for hiring an independent contractor can be cheaper, but there are trade-offs that you're making when you're doing that. And we'll walk through what those trade-offs are. Number one, it's important to understand that you are the employer. You are responsible for vetting candidates, interviewing them, making sure that they can do the work that you're hiring them to do. Second, you are responsible for any background check if that's important to you. And it may be something that you should strongly consider just because you are letting someone into your home. So it's important when you are hiring an independent contractor to go back and do a background check. You are letting someone to your home. If you have items that are of value to you, sometimes it's important to check that this is someone who doesn't have a criminal background, right? So you do run that risk. The next item is the IRS, and I'll skip a couple bullet points here, does consider people providing home care services to be employees and not independent contractors. Even though this says using an independent contractor, you really should think about it as an employee that you're hiring. With that said, I do have kids, and I know how families do hire babysitters. Sometimes they hire it as employees, sometimes they hire them as independent contractors. You understand what the legal rules are around this. We'll leave it up to you to determine how you address payroll and taxes as you hire these folks. The next item, which I think is something that you should strongly consider, because this can come back to hurt you more so than getting caught by the IRS. It's important that you are legal on the hiring front. But liability and workers' compensation. You are letting someone into your house. Legal definition, IRS, other folks think of them as your employees. So what happens when they're in your house and they get hurt for whatever reason? If they do get hurt, they can make claims against your insurance. So your insurance policy needs to be able to support those claims. And if they ever sue you for their any issues that they experience in your home, you want to make sure that you are covered for that. The other thing important to note, when you are dealing with someone that you're hiring directly, define the level of care needed. You are, again, responsible for the vetting process, so you need to ask the questions, make sure that they have the skills, the personality, and experience to support what you need. I can tell you that even though I know a lot about this topic, I'm not a good home care person. Personality-wise, may not be the right fit. So you want to assess for things like that when you're hiring someone. Negotiating hours and rates, because there's a one-to-one relationship, it's up to you and that person to come to an agreement on what makes sense to you. And the final thing to note is, when you hire someone directly, they're out sick, they're on vacation, whatever the situation is, there is no backup. Unless they have an arrangement with other people they know that you're comfortable with to provide that backup. The backup is going to be people that you know, like family members, in that situation. Laura, anything that I'm missing?
I just, err on the side of caution when hiring, an outside caregiver in that sense that there's no one overlooking them, right? And so that responsibility is totally on the family member for that support. And, a lot of them, they're not medical or, it's just a little bit, more hesitant to go that route. So really, really think about that before. And like I said, I would definitely meet with the home care representative before you go this route.
Yeah, certainly, there are plenty of folks who have good experiences hiring directly. You just want to be careful that you're not the exception when you're going down this path. So do your homework carefully when hiring directly. It can be a great experience. If not, like any business transaction, make sure that you understand what you're getting into and protect yourself ahead of time. So how to pay for home care. Most home care services are private pay. That means that you have to directly pay for the hours that you purchase. Beyond private pay, there are a few other options to consider. Some people do buy long-term care insurance, and that insurance can pay for the services. One thing to note about long-term care insurance, and we certainly will have a blog about that. But long-term care insurance, sometimes there is a period of time that where you have to use the service before they can initiate payment. So sometimes when we work with families and who have long-term care insurance, what we do is we encourage them to buy a small amount of home care services up front, even before they need sort of that continuous care. Just so that they don't have to have that waiting period when they need to. And a lot of times, when you buy small service, if you're doing private pay anyway, minimize the amount that you're paying out of pocket so that when you do need that, more intense continuous care, the long-term care insurance can kick in. Mass Health, if you are eligible for Mass Health does provide care support options, either in subsidized form or definitely at a level that a higher reimbursement than you having to pay for the service on your own. Aging Services Access Points, ASAPs, these are agencies in the state that will work with folks who are on Mass Health, and they'll provide those subsidies. If you are a veteran, the VA does provide some benefits there as well. Finally, PACE is an organization that is both a provider and health insurance agency, and they can also provide some subsidized services as well, similar to the ASAPs. Laura, you mentioned that there might be some options for employers and Medicare. Can you speak to more about that?
So I often, sometimes I do come across families whose children's work for, Pacific Company, and sometimes they do offer, assistance to those children so that they can take that money as a benefit from their employer to use towards home care for their parents. So I always say, check into what your employee does offer for benefits.
That's awesome. And what about Medicare?
So Medicare too, I say always ask because you never know what's changed. Sometimes if you have Medicare C Advantage, they will pay for some home care, but again, you have to look into each one of your policies, your insurances, and ask those questions because everything's always changing.
Yeah. So, hopefully, you got a good overview of home care services, how to use them, what questions to ask when you are evaluating your options. So here are our final recommendations. Certainly understand what your needs are. If you are in need of support for some ADLs or IADLs, understand what they are so you're targeting the right companies for those services. Research your options, right? Look at who can provide those services. Certainly, if you are talking to agencies, talk to more than one. And there are reasons why you want to talk to more than one. One, their business terms can vary. Even though they say, they're charging $38 an hour and both agencies may charge the same rate, the underlying business terms may work differently for you. Second, as Laura mentioned earlier, regardless of your options, it's all about the availability of staffing, right? And it's more than just the availability of staffing. It's also about finding the right fit. We all have different personalities, and sometimes we prefer, if you're an introvert, you might prefer someone who's more introverted. If you're an extrovert, you may prefer someone who's going to be more social. So it really depends on what your preferences are. So when you talk with different agencies, you might be able to get a feel for who are the caregivers who can be assigned to my account, and am I going to get along well with them when they're in my home. If you're looking for independent caregivers or direct hires, there are services that where you can find them. Care.com, SitterCity.com are two online services where you can say, I want to hire someone, and you're going to get a bunch of folks responding to your essentially job posting. Nextdoor is a resource where it works a little bit differently in a way that you're not really posting for a job. You're asking for the community to tell you who they would recommend to do this kind of work. If you put the question out there, you're going to get a lot of recommendations. Do understand that again, regardless of whatever the responses are you get back from your inquiries, do your homework. Hiring directly does have a lower cost benefit, but you are taking on the risk of hiring someone directly when you go down that path. If you're looking for an agency, do consider Home Instead. They do really good work in the community. If you're looking for other options, certainly the Senior Center can provide recommendations. If you work with ASAPs and PACE, they also have providers that they can recommend. And if you want another source, someone who can be independent and give you an overview of companies that are reputable, that we vetted, contact My Care Community, and we can offer some guidance there as well. Laura, thank you so much for being here today. Anything you would like to mention as we wrap up the session?
One other thing I might mention is even though if a family does work with an ASAP, you can still work at the private pay home care.
Yes. ASAPs, and the reason why Laura mentioned that is ASAPs will give you a number of hours that they will cover for, and so if you need more hours than that, sometimes people may not realize that they can hire an agency on top of that to, for the other hours that they need coverage for. So for us, that's a wrap. Thank you for having us today. We look forward to chatting with you again about the next topic that might be helpful to you as you think about the aging care process. Thank you.
Thank you.